I never expected that a simple driveway dispute would turn my life into an all-out war. But there I was, standing at the edge of my own property, staring at a monstrous SUV parked right in the middle of my driveway, completely blocking my car in. My neighbor, Karen, yes, an actual Karen, stood on her porch, arms crossed, a smug smirk plastered across her face. "You can walk," she called out, sipping from a ridiculous bedazzled tumbler. "It's not like you have anywhere important to be." I clenched my fists, my blood boiling. I had told her 100 times to stop blocking my driveway, but today was the last straw. Today, I had an important client meeting. Today, I had a shipment of supplies coming in. Today, I was done playing nice. I marched up to her, my voice steady but furious. "Karen, move your car. Now." She shrugged. "Can't. My cousin's coming over, and she needs a place to park. Besides, it's just a driveway." "Just a driveway?" "Oh." She had no idea what she had just started. "Fine," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You don't want to move your car? Then I'll handle this my way." And so began the craziest revenge plan I had ever devised. It all started with small things. Karen had always been a nuisance, but lately she had gotten bolder. First, she'd started accidentally rolling her trash bins onto my property, forcing me to move them every garbage day. Then, she let her landscapers blow leaves and debris onto my side of the fence, pretending it was an accident. But the driveway? That was personal. She had a huge driveway of her own, but for some reason, she loved using mine as an extra parking space. I had spoken to her civilly about it before. Heck, I even left a note on her car once, politely asking her to stop. Her response? She crumpled up the note and threw it onto my lawn. That was when I knew I had to fight fire with fire. I started looking into what I could legally do about someone blocking my driveway. Turns out, I had a few options. I could call a tow truck, but Karen was tight with the HOA, and I knew they'd give me grief. I could install a security gate, but that was expensive and would take time. Or I could get creative, and that's when I had the most ridiculous, over-the-top idea ever. A drawbridge. Yes, you heard me. If Karen wanted to block my driveway, I'd make sure that next time, she wouldn't be able to even touch it. The plan was simple. Dig out a trench at the entrance of my driveway. Install a mechanical drawbridge that only I could control. Sit back and watch Karen lose her mind. It was insane, petty, and a whole lot of fun. And I was going to make it happen. Will my drawbridge plan actually work? Would Karen retaliate? Stay tuned. I didn't waste any time. The moment Karen slammed her door shut, I got to work. If she thought she could block my driveway and get away with it, she was in for a rude awakening. The first step? Planning the drawbridge. I'm no engineer, but I'm a quick learner. After a few hours of research, I found a design that was perfect, a hydraulic lift system strong enough to raise a steel platform over a trench. With a little help from my buddy Jake, who happens to run a metal shop, I knew this was more than possible. "So, let me get this straight," Jake said, scratching his head when I explained my idea. "You want me to help you build a working drawbridge for your driveway?" "Exactly." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You're crazy, but I'm in." Within days, we had a plan and the materials. I rented an excavator to dig out a trench at the entrance of my driveway. It was about 4 feet deep and 8 feet wide, just enough to make it impossible for anyone to drive over unless the bridge was down. As I worked, Karen didn't even bother to hide her curiosity. She stood at her window, peering through her blinds like some villain from a cartoon. I smiled and waved. She scowled in response. Perfect. By the third day, the trench was done, and Jake arrived with the steel platform. It was a beast, 800 pounds of reinforced steel, custom fitted to my driveway. "You sure you want to go through with this?" Jake asked as we lowered the platform into place. "Oh, I'm sure." I grinned. This is just the beginning. The hydraulic system was the final piece. With a flick of a switch, the drawbridge would lift, cutting off anyone from driving onto my property. It took 10 hours of sweat and grease, but by sunset, it was operational. I tested it for the first time. The motors hummed softly as the steel platform slowly lifted into the air. My driveway was now an impenetrable fortress. And just in time, the next morning, I heard the familiar rumble of Karen's SUV. She pulled out of her driveway, and, as usual, tried to swing right into mine. Only this time, clang. Her tires hit solid steel. I stepped outside, my finger hovering over the remote control. "Morning, Karen," I called out cheerfully. Her eyes bulged as she realized what she was looking at. "What the heck is this?" "It's my new driveway system. You like it? You can't block your own driveway like this," she spluttered. I smiled wider. "Actually, I can. Private property and all. You understand, right?" She threw the car in a park and stomped toward me, her face turning beet red. "This is harassment. I'm calling the HOA." I leaned against the drawbridge, calm as ever. "Go ahead. But I've already cleared everything with city zoning. Completely legal." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For once, she had nothing to say. But as she stormed back to her car, I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let this go quietly. The war had just begun. What would Karen do next? And how far was I willing to go to protect my driveway? Things were only getting started. If I thought Karen would back down after the drawbridge, I was dead wrong. For the next few days, my driveway was blissfully Karen-free. No more blocked cars, no more smug looks. But deep down, I knew it was too quiet. And with Karen, quiet meant trouble. Trouble arrived 3 days later in the form of a bright red pickup truck and a man who looked like he chewed nails for breakfast. He was the kind of guy you'd expect to see on a demolition crew. Broad shoulders, grease-streaked jeans, and a permanent scowl. I was trimming my hedges when I saw him pull up in front of Karen's house. She trotted out like she was hosting a royal reception, pointing toward my driveway while waving a stack of papers. My stomach twisted. Whatever was coming, it wasn't good. Sure enough, moments later, the guy stomped up to me, a sour expression plastered on his face. "You the one with the drawbridge?" His tone made it clear he thought I was nuts. "That's me," I said, trying to sound casual. He grunted and held up the papers. "HOA hired me to inspect it. If it's violating any guidelines, it's coming down." I bit back a laugh. Of course, Karen called the HOA. I had been ready for this. "By all means, inspect away," I said, gesturing toward the drawbridge. "But you'll find it's perfectly legal. I've already cleared everything with the city." His eyes narrowed. "We'll see." For the next hour, he crawled over every inch of my setup, measuring, scribbling notes, even taking photos. Meanwhile, Karen hovered nearby, practically vibrating with anticipation. I could feel her eyes burning a hole in the back of my head. When the inspector finally finished, he pulled out his phone, mumbled a few things, then turned to Karen. "It's legal," he said bluntly. "Guy's got the permits. Nothing we can do." I swear I heard something shatter inside Karen's soul. Her face twisted into a mask of rage. "Are you kidding me? It's a drawbridge." "Yeah," the guy shrugged. "And it's legal." With that, he stomped back to his truck and peeled off, leaving Karen fuming on the sidewalk. I couldn't resist. "Looks like I'm keeping my drawbridge," I said sweetly. Her fists clenched. "This isn't over," she hissed. And boy, was she right. The next day, it was 6 a.m. when I heard a loud, obnoxious beep 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 outside my bedroom window. I stumbled out of bed and peered through the blinds, and nearly lost it. Karen had hired a team of landscapers with one goal: to make my life miserable. They were parked right in front of my driveway, again. But instead of blocking my car, they were dumping mounds of mulch right along the edge of my property line, burying my drawbridge under a mountain of wood chips. I stormed outside in my pajamas, the cool morning air doing nothing to calm my rising fury. "What the heck are you doing?" Karen, dressed in a ridiculous pink tracksuit, sipped her coffee like she wasn't orchestrating pure chaos. "Oh, I'm just improving the neighborhood," she said innocently. "Beautification project. Isn't it lovely?" "Lovely?" I could barely see my driveway, let alone use the drawbridge. "You know this is harassment, right?" I said through gritted teeth. She widened her eyes in fake surprise. "Harassment? I'm just being a good neighbor." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. Two could play this game. "Fine," I said, turning back toward my house. "You want a war, Karen? You've got one." I had beaten her once. I could do it again. And this time, I was going to make sure she never messed with me again. Karen thought she'd bury my drawbridge, but I wasn't done yet. The next move? It was mine, and it was going to be epic. If Karen thought a mountain of mulch would stop me, She clearly hadn't done her homework. While she sipped her coffee and strutted around like she owned the neighborhood, I was already planning my next move, a move that would make my drawbridge look like child's play. I spent the next few hours researching, calling in a few favors, and pulling together a plan that would make Karen's head spin. If she wanted a war, I was going to give her a masterpiece. By noon, a flatbed truck rumbled down the street and parked in front of my house. Karen was outside, trimming her already perfect hedges when the delivery guy unloaded a giant steel frame onto my driveway. Her curiosity got the best of her, and she marched over, hands on her hips. "What's that?" she demanded, her tone dripping with suspicion. I smiled as innocently as I could manage. "Oh, just a little project to keep my driveway accessible." Her eyes narrowed. "You can't just do whatever you want, you know. The HOA already cleared it with the city." I cut in smoothly. "And as long as it's on my property, it's none of the HOA's business." Her lips curled into a snarl, but she stormed back to her house without another word. I could feel her watching from behind her blinds, but I didn't care. By the time I finished, she'd regret ever messing with me. That night, under the cover of darkness, I worked. With the help of a couple of friends, I transformed that steel frame into something spectacular, a fully motorized, retractable platform. If Karen wanted to block my driveway, fine. But now, I had a hydraulic lift that could raise my car over her mulch barrier like something out of a spy movie. At 6 a.m. the next morning, Karen's favorite time to cause chaos, I gave her a show she'd never forget. The moment her landscapers arrived to dump even more mulch, I hit a button on my phone. With a smooth mechanical whir, the steel platform lifted my car into the air and over the barrier. I drove off without a hitch, leaving the stunned workers gaping in confusion. Karen burst out of her front door just in time to see me sail over her handiwork. Her jaw hung open, her face redder than a traffic light. "You think you're funny, don't you?" she shrieked. I leaned out my window with a grin. "Not funny, just smarter." But Karen wasn't done yet. Later that day, I came home to find a certified letter taped to my door, a formal complaint from the HOA. According to them, my new hydraulic lift was an unsightly structure that violated the community's aesthetic standards. Karen had found a loophole, and she was exploiting it for all it was worth. I was furious, but instead of lashing out, I took a deep breath. If she wanted to play dirty, I was about to go nuclear. I spent the evening combing through the HOA's bylaws, looking for any weakness I could exploit. And that's when I found it. A clause so powerful, it could destroy everything Karen had built. See, the HOA's guidelines stated that any modifications to a property required a unanimous vote from the board. And Karen? She'd never gotten approval for the extensive renovations she'd done last year, including the oversized deck that extended onto community property. If she wanted to use the rules against me, I was about to turn those same rules into her worst nightmare. The next morning, I sent a formal request to the HOA board to review Karen's unauthorized renovations, and by the afternoon, they were all over it. When she saw the inspection team on her lawn, her face twisted into a look of pure panic. I leaned on my drawbridge with a casual wave as the head inspector pointed out violation after violation. "You can't do this," she screeched at me, but her voice trembled. "Actually," I said, pulling out a copy of the bylaws, "I can. And if your deck isn't torn down in 30 days, you're looking at massive fines." Her face drained of color. For the first time since this battle began, Karen looked scared. And that's when I knew I was winning. Karen thought she had the upper hand with her mulch, but now her entire backyard was on the chopping block. And I wasn't done yet. For all her bluster and intimidation, Karen had made one critical mistake, underestimating me. She thought she could bury me under piles of mulch and HOA complaints, but now her empire was crumbling, and I was about to deliver the final blow. The day after the inspection, I filed an official complaint with the city's zoning office. Karen's oversized deck wasn't just an HOA violation. It extended 10 feet beyond the property line on a public land. That meant she wasn't just facing fines from the HOA. She was in violation of municipal code. And the city? They didn't play around. Within 48 hours, a city inspector arrived with a clipboard a measuring tape, an expression that suggested he took his job very seriously. Karen tried to sweet-talk him, offering lemonade and her fake, saccharine smile, but he wasn't having it. "Ma'am, this deck is in clear violation of city code," he said flatly. "You've got 30 days to bring it down, or we'll be issuing fines, $500 per day." I watched from my porch as Karen's face twisted in a mix of rage and panic. She was backed into a corner, and for the first time, she knew it. But I wasn't done yet. That evening, while sipping my coffee on the Drawbridge, I decided to give her a taste of her own medicine. I sent out an anonymous tip to the local newspaper, complete with photos of her illegal deck and the ongoing city investigation. The next morning, the headline blared across the community news. HOA president faces backlash over illegal renovations. Fines loom. And just like that, Karen's reputation shattered. Neighbors who had once feared her began whispering behind her back. Some openly laughed as the city taped a violation notice on her front door in bold red letters. The woman who once wielded power over everyone was now the laughingstock of the neighborhood. A week later, the demolition began. I couldn't help but smile as Karen stood on her lawn, watching her precious deck get torn apart by a construction crew. Every plank, every nail, they all came down while she fumed silently. When I drove over my drawbridge that afternoon, I rolled down my window with the biggest smile I could muster. "Lovely day, isn't it?" I called out. Karen's glare could have melted steel, but she said nothing, because what could she say? I'd beaten her at her own game. And the final twist? The HOA board, embarrassed by the media attention and tired of Karen's antics, held a special vote. By unanimous decision, Karen was removed as HOA president. The new president? A quiet, no-nonsense guy named Dave who immediately abolished half of Karen's ridiculous rules, including the one about unsightly structures. My hydraulic drawbridge? Perfectly legal. And as for Karen? Well, she faded into the background, just another disgruntled neighbor with a broken deck and a bruised ego. In the end, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about standing up to bullies who think the rules don't apply to them. And sometimes, when someone tries to block your path, the best thing you can do is build a drawbridge and rise above them. Karen thought she could control everything. But in the end, I won. And every time I press that button and my driveway lifts into the air, I'm reminded of one simple truth. When someone tries to bury you, don't just fight back. Rise higher.